The thing no one tells you about interstellar diplomacy is that it's mostly snacks and awkward silences. Miles Jenner, Earth's least impressive ambassadorial technician, just cross-legged on a maglev cushion, trying not to drop crumbs on his jumpsuit. His plate, a suspiciously warm slab of anti-static polymer, contained 4 pizza bagels, 3.5 now, a pear-colored cube of something allegedly vegan, and what might have once been a tangerine. If tangerines came from planets with 6 suns and a sense of humor, across from him sat Princess Saravai of the Ilari Empire. Serene and terrifying in the way only someone wearing a cloak that actively shimmered with nebula data could be, her long ears angled like elegant antennae, tracking every move, every blink, probably every micro-emotion he didn't realize he was broadcasting. "I do not understand," she said, tilting her head. "You made a jest?" Miles froze mid-chew. "I what?" "Your comment regarding the ceremonial bonding ritual," he said, and I quote, "If I ever married someone, you'd be my first choice." This was a jest. Right, Miles? Coughed. Yes, that was just banter. Earth thing. Like small talk. Like saying nice weather during a solar flare. She blinked slowly. "But we are currently in the high convergence chamber. Per Ilari custom, all declarations made. Within this chamber, less voided by shame challenger binding." Miles stared. The pizza bagel turned to concrete in his mouth. Binding how? As in legally? Cosmically? Matrimonially? Silence fell, the kind that made black holes jealous. Somewhere in the room, a diplomatic aide dropped a stylus and quietly resigned. Saravai's voice dropped to a softer register, like a data stream shifting frequencies. "Do you wish to retract?" Miles considered it. Considered it so hard he saw stars, could initiate a formal dishonor protocol. He could throw himself into the humiliation pitch, as that was a real thing. The Ilari took symbolic gestures very seriously. Or he could lie, flee, fake his own death and start a new life, selling knockoff moon rocks in Sector Gamma 9. And then she did something unexpected. She smiled, not the polite, distant smile she'd flashed all week through treaty briefings and gravitational field dinners. This one reached her eyes, lit something warm behind them. "I accept," she said. Miles blinked. "You do? I do?" A pause. Did I use that phrase correctly? There was a rushing sound in his ears, like someone had turned on a neural. "Wind tunnel, round them," Ilari delegates murmured, nodding solemnly. One of them tapped something on a floating obsidian tablet that promptly emitted ceremonial flute noises. Another dropped glitter onto the floor. Somewhere, an AI herald began composing wedding hash. Miles opened his mouth, closed it, then whispered to no one in particular, "This is what I get for trying to be charming." The ship they gave him for the post-declaration cultural integration retreat looked like a stingray in the middle of a psychedelic identity crisis. Its walls pulsed faintly, with a slow bioluminescent rhythm that responded to sound, mood, or strong opinions about sandwich taxonomy. Saravai stood beside him in the main atrium, pointing to floating displays of scenic destinations, none of which Miles could pronounce. "You will begin with the Antharian Gardens," she said, followed by the Sentient Artifacts Museum, and then perhaps an encounter with the fold beasts of Reltel. They perform rituals for bonding pairs. Very enriching. Miles was still trying to understand how this counted as retreat. He'd assumed paperwork, awkward conversations with HR drones, not space carnivals and beast encounters, he said, trying to keep the quiver out of his voice. "I don't know if I'm, qualified for bonding rituals with large, sentient anything." Saravai raised a brow. "They're mostly metaphysical. That does not help." The ship took off in a blur of light, gravity, folding like origami around them. Miles clutched the edge of a seat that didn't exist a second ago. "So," he said, "after they leveled out, hypothetically speaking, what happens if I fail to impress your people?" "They would be disappointed," she said, "but that is not the concern." "It's not." "No." She turned to him, expression unreadable. The concern is whether you want to impress me, he swallowed. Is there a correct answer to that? Only an honest one. Miles opened his mouth, closed it again, and decided to make his escape the old-fashioned way by pretending to nap. That night, Miles was introduced to the Royal Sleep Protocol, a chamber filled with musical fog, levitating silk cocoons, and dream monitors calibrated to emotional subtext. The cocoon buzzed pleasantly as it scanned him for anxiety and displayed a politely concerned emoji on its interface. He lay back, eyes wide. So, he muttered, first contact, and I propose. To an alien princess, by accident? This is either the best rom-com ever made, or a very elaborate hostage situation. From the cocoon next to his, Saravai's voice drifted through the dim lavender light. Do all Earth courtships involve this level of confusion? Yes, Miles said. It's how we know it's real. Pause. I find it strangely comforting. Until we get to in-laws, a soft chuckle. Then silence. Then, just as he began to drift into a restless, swirling dreamscape filled with spaghetti monsters and tiny judges in bathrobes, she added, for what it's worth, if I ever chose someone on Earth, I might choose you too. Miles groaned into the pillow interface. Great. Now I'm in love and jet-lagged. Somewhere deep in the ship, the AI changed the ambient dreamscape to feature a tiny cartoon wedding, cake with rocket boosters. He hated how cute it was. Miles woke up to the smell of simulated citrus and a holographic bird asking him to rate.
S.
His sleep on a scale from mildly restful to transcendent union with the dream weave. He chose mildly restful and got passive-aggressive chirping in return. The cocoon ejected him like a piece of overripe fruit and lowered him gently onto a floor that subtly adjusted to his equilibrium. The ship had opinions, and Miles had. Learned quickly that disagreeing with it led to doors refusing to open in showers, adjusting temperature according to mood. Sira VAI was already awake and dressed in something, made entirely of shifting light and spatial equations. You snored, she said calmly, sipping from a cup that periodically whispered affirmations. At first I thought it was a malfunction in the air filtration system. Then I realized you were dreaming about Earth cats again. They were. Wearing hats? He mumbled. It was important. Today's itinerary, according to the princess's personal assistant drone, which looked suspiciously like a floating zucchini with a monocle, was a visit to the Galactic Botanical Mind Array, followed by a diplomatic brunch with the High Minister of Moisture on Arvia 6. Why are we brunching with a moisture minister? Miles asked, stuffing his arms into sleeves that seemed to wriggle resentfully. Isn't that, extremely specific? Moisture is highly political in that region, Saravai replied. There was a mist embargo last decade that nearly started a civil war. I miss when my biggest diplomatic problem was vending machines that wouldn't take coins. Saravai raised a brow. Your machines refuse currency? Only when you're in a hurry, the Galactic Botanical Mind. Array was not so much a garden as it was a sprawling telepathic experience engineered by sentient flora. Visitors were required to wear headbands that translated plant-based emotional transmissions into images, sounds, or smells. Miles chose the beginner setting, Earth-like nostalgia with reduced existential dread, and was immediately greeted by a vision of his childhood bedroom. Except the wallpaper kept whispering his GPA. Saravai strolled beside him, completely unbothered. Mindstream conjured vistas of starfields and silver cities carved into asteroid bones. At one point, a flower showed her a memory of her coronation ceremony, half in the real, half in pure emotion, and Miles had to sit down to process the wave of gravity that came with it. You were 12? He guessed. 14, she said. It is different for us. Maturity is a sequence, not a milestone. A sequence, he muttered. That explains dating on Earth. They sat on a bench made of warm, humming wood. The flowers around them shimmered with moonlight. Sarava glanced at him sideways. You seemed affected. Just a lot, he said. I'm used to plants being either decorative or attempting to kill me with pollen. They are alive here. So is the espresso machine in the embassy, but I don't ask it about its dreams. One of the vines gently tapped Miles on the forehead and transmitted an image of him tripping during his third-grade dance recital. We recoiled. Okay? Wow. Personal. The vine pulsed with what he could only describe as leafy amusement. Saravai touched its end and closed her eyes for a moment. She likes you, she said. She finds your emotional chaos refreshing. That's either the nicest insult I've ever gotten or the meanest compliment. They made it to RV6 just in time for brunch, which turned out to be an elaborate ceremony involving gelatinous pancakes, vibrating forks, and a wall that sang whenever someone took a bite. The High Minister of Moisture, an orb-shaped being composed entirely of droplets, greeted them with what sounded like polite gurgling. Miles bowed, as instructed. The orb jiggled appreciatively. "Tell him we're honored to attend," he whispered. "You just did," Saravai said. "He speaks 26 hydration dialects, including subconscious body temperature fluctuation." Miles began sweating and immediately caused the minister to emit a celebratory squelch. "I think I accidentally proposed again." No, that was gratitude. Possibly indigestion. They sat. The chairs adjusted for species and body shape. Miles turned into something between a beanbag and a mother's hug. The wall began singing an opera about surface tension. Miles leaned over. "What happens if I accidentally offend him? It will spritz you gently and then evaporate out of embarrassment. That might actually be how I want to go." Despite the vibrating cutlery in the opera, the conversation eventually shifted toward the engagement. The minister asked Saravai if she was pleased with her chosen consort. She responded in a calm tone that made Miles' brain itch. He is ill-prepared, but uniquely sincere. The minister quivered like someone had dropped a pebble in a bathtub. A rare trait, the translator chimed. She is pleased. Miles tried not to choke on his fizz bread. He wanted to ask her what she meant by uniquely sincere, but the moment passed. And soon they were toasting with cups of carbonated dew and watching a holographic montage of Saravai's life. Highlights set to ambient jazz. Back on the ship, Miles flopped onto the neural couch, which promptly began adjusting to support his lumbar regrets. "I have a question," he said, staring at the ceiling. "Yes." Saravai was meditating mid-air, legs folded in the Alari gravity reversal posture. "Do you actually want to marry me?" She opened one eye. "Would it matter if I said yes?" "I think it would matter a lot." She lowered herself gently to the floor. "Your species does not often consider love to be a decision. We tend to think it should just happen. For us, it does not just happen. It is acknowledged, defined, declared." He sat up. "Oh, this is whole thing here. Okay with it?" She nodded once. "I chose you when you chose me. Even if it was accidental." He rubbed his face. "I was trying to diffuse tension. I'm involved in a cross-species romance with royal implications." Saravai smiled faintly. "And yet you continue, because I think I'm starting to like you," he admitted. She stepped closer, tilting her head. "Then perhaps you are not as ill-prepared as I thought." "Thanks, I think." The couch, sensing a romantic beat, began playing soft saxophone. Miles groaned. "Can we turn that off?" "Too late," said the ship's voice. "The mixtape has already achieved sentience." He buried his head in his hands. "I miss pizza bagels. We have pizza synthesis on deck 3. "Yeah, but it's not the same unless you're risking mild gastrointestinal distress." She considered this. "Then perhaps you are ready for the fold beasts after all." Miles sighed. "That sounds like a weird euphemism." "It's not." She said, "Probably." Arrived at Reltel orbit at local midnight, which didn't mean much in a system with 3 moons and a sky that glowed like an over-caffeinated mood ring. Miles squinted out the viewport at a surface that kept rearranging itself every few seconds. According to Saravai, it was a visual translation of local gravitational harmonics. According to Miles, it looked like a kaleidoscope having an existential crisis. "We'll be landing shortly," Saravai said, her tone serene as always. The fold beasts prefer visitors who arrive disoriented. They believe confusion opens the soul. Miles clutched the armrest. "I thought I was coming here too. Bond. Not get spiritually mugged. They're sacred beings," she said. "But yes, they can be intense." The shuttle descended through a mist of sentient pollen that tried to ask him about his deepest regrets. He answered middle school and sneezed it away. They touched down on a platform made of semi-wear stone that introduced itself as Greg and warned them not to lick anything, except the air. It added cheerfully, "The air is minty." Miles stepped out with cautious optimism and mild foot sweat. The landscape shimmered in waves, like someone was constantly tweaking reality's color settings. Off in the distance, a large shadow moved in a way that made his brain hiccup. The fold beasts were waiting. There were 4 of them, or maybe 1. It was hard to tell. Their bodies folded in and out of dimensions like they were flipping through emotional flashcards. Tentacles, wings, or possibly very expressive scarves emerged and vanished at odd intervals. One of them, possibly the leader, into a shape vaguely resembling a throne made of musical chairs. "Are they supposed to look like that?" Miles whispered. "Yes," Sci-Fi replied.
"How?"
"That is their mating posture." "Charming." The fold beasts spoke in overlapping harmonics that felt like being complimented and judged at the same time. Sci-Fi translated. "They want to know the nature of our bond." Miles hesitated. "That's a big question to open with." Answer. "Truthfully," she said, "they despise cliché." He turned toward the whirling mass of unknowable geometry and cleared his throat. "I said something stupid." She took it seriously. Then we both sort of leaned in. The fold beasts paused, the air humming with deliberation. "They approve," Sci-Fi said. "They say that's the closest thing to honesty they've heard this week." Miles exhaled. "Well, that's terrifyingly validating." One of the beasts approached. It unfolded a limb that appeared to be made of nostalgic memories, and offered it to Miles. He reached out, and for a brief second, he saw himself years from now. Older, still uncertain, but not alone. The vision evaporated before he could process it. "They like you," Sci-Fi said. "They've invited us to the inner spiral." "I feel like that's either a sacred ritual or a stomach condition." "Both," she replied. The inner spiral was not a place, but a process. They were led through a maze of shifting platforms that required them to walk backwards, sidestep emotional baggage, and at one point, perform synchronized blinking exercises. Miles failed spectacularly at every step, but Sci-Fi passed him, tips through whispered jokes. "Pretend your anxiety is an access code," she said. "Let it open something instead of shut you down." He managed to synchronize for 3 seconds before accidentally projecting a childhood memory of losing his goldfish. The fold beast responded by offering him a bowl of floating water beads, and a solemn, unblinking gaze. Wasn't sure if it was sympathy or a test. Eventually they reached a chamber where time curled in on itself like a sleepy cat. Sci-Fi took his hand. "Now we share the intent." "I thought we were already doing that." "This is formal, ritualized, ceremonial, and possibly metaphysical. You're just stacking adjectives now." She stepped forward. The fold beasts surrounded them and began to sing. It wasn't music exactly, more like a vibration in his bones that translated directly into understanding. It told stories of bonds forged through conflict, through mistake, through the fragile miracle of miscommunication turned meaningful. Sci-Fi's voice joined the song, and Miles felt her presence. In his mind, like a warm current, she wasn't probing or demanding, just offering pieces of herself. Hopes, doubts, strange childhood facts, like the time she tried to make a pet out of a plasma wisp. He responded in kind, awkwardly at first, but then with growing clarity. His fear of not being enough, his longing for something real, even if it came wrapped in confusion and alien courtship customs. When the song ended, fold beasts vanished one by one, each folding itself into a point of light. The last one left behind a small stone. "A token," Sci-Fi explained. "It means our bond has been acknowledged. You're now seen." Miles turned the stone in his hand, shimmered faintly, displaying their faces in alternating frames. He looked at Sci-Fi. "That was more intimate than any dating app I've ever used. Do you feel different?" He checked, heart racing, palms sweaty, brain still lagging by half a beat. "Yes," he said, "but in a good way, I think." Then, it worked. Back on the ship, the AI was waiting with a banner that read, "Congratulations on your interspecies psychospiritual union." It offered celebratory tea that tasted like accomplishment and mild dizziness. Miles sipped cautiously. So what now? Prepare for the Convergence Summit. My family expects us to appear together. He paused, as in public. As in front of your family. She nodded, including my grandmother, the one who once defeated a warlord with her eyebrows. Yes, he slumped. I need a nap, and possibly a disguise. You'll do fine. He looked at the stone again. They really saw us, didn't they? Yes, and they liked what they saw. The couch turned on its fuzzy support mode again and began playing soothing harmonics. Somewhere in the corner, the celebration banner turned itself into a scarf and wrapped lovingly around a chair. Miles closed his eyes. For the record, I'm still figuring this out. That's part of the appeal, she said softly. The lights dimmed. The ship hummed. And somewhere in the stars above, fourfold beasts gossiped in quantum verse about the strange, soft man who accidentally became royalty. Miles was still asleep when the summons arrived. The ship's AI, now going by the name Clarence since it said it had outgrown default settings, pinged him with a gentle vibration and an escalating playlist titled Wake Up OR Phase Diplomatic Incident. He flailed from the couch mid-snore, kicked over a bowl of sentimental noodles from the night before, and staggered into the hallway wearing a shirt backward and one sock that blinked disapprovingly. Clarence cleared its throat through the wall speaker. Good morning, Ambassador Jenner. I've scheduled your facial recalibration and breath optimization treatments. Miles squinted. Clarence, am I dying? No, sir. You've been requested for pre-union rites by the Ilari High Matriarchal Council. Estimated probability of emotional combustion, 74%.
Ow.
That's higher than my last cholesterol test. Would you like a mild sedative? Is the sedative pizza? I'll log that as a yes. By the time Miles reached the preparation chamber, Saravai was already undergoing ritual alignment, process that involved floating sideways while a trio of ancient Ilari chanted in decimal tones. She opened one eye when she saw him. Late I was dreaming about pancakes and regret. Appropriate. Council rites were scheduled to take place in the obsidian halls of enactment, which Miles initially hoped was a rock-themed concert venue, but quickly discovered was more like a judgment palace with better lighting. Each participant would need to undergo the 3 proving moments: memory exposure, tent validation, and the gaze. Miles passed the first 2 by accident. For memory exposure, he tripped over a ceremonial carpet and mentally projected the time he cried during an animated dog movie. The elders deemed it honorable vulnerability. For intent validation, he attempted to compliment Saravai's diplomatic resilience, but mispronounced the phrase into something that translated as, "Your emotions are efficient like a tactical vacuum." This, too, was praised. Then came the gaze. A 6-eyed elder floated forward, her ears braided with stardust and what looked suspiciously like dry spaghetti. She peered into Miles' soul like she was looking for expired coupons. "You are full of doubt," she said, voice echoing. "Yeah, that tracks, but you are not insincere. That's shockingly kind of you." She continued staring. "You harbor feelings you do not understand. Again me in a nutshell." She turned to Saravai. "He may be unrefined, but his confusion is authentic. It is a rare quality." Miles exhaled. "Great. Authentic confusion. Exactly how I want to be remembered." They were dismissed with a bowl of blessing fruit and a pamphlet titled, "So You've Accidentally Entered a Cosmic Union. Now What?" The next stage was the ceremonial wardrobe selection. Miles stood in a rotating mirror while the Ilari fashion consultants clucked and hummed and applied fabric that reacted to his internal temperature and sarcasm levels. The final result looked like a tuxedo that had fallen into a dimensional rift with a nebula. "This is," Lottie said, examining the suit's collar, which occasionally shimmered with projections of his last known coordinates. Saravai emerged from her own fitting, draped in patterns of moving starlight, her long ears adorned with micro-constellations. Miles stared. You look like you stepped out of a legend and into a very confusing dream I once had about royalty and space waffles. That is the traditional effect. They practiced walking the path of declaration along, shifting platform that adjusted based on mutual trust levels. Every time Miles doubted his footing, it dipped slightly. Every time he glanced at Saravai and felt that strange little nod of affection, it leveled out. This feels like emotional Jenga. It's meant to be. Relationships are structurally unstable without balance? Do all your metaphors involve dangerous architecture? It's only the important ones? The final rehearsal was interrupted by a diplomatic alert. Clarence appeared in a flickering projection, wearing a tiny crown. Pardon the intrusion, but an unauthorized vessel has entered orbit. It is transmitting marriage annulment codes. And a very aggressive power ballad. Miles blinked. What? It's your ex. I don't have an ex, not your ex. A former claimant to the princess's hand. One who believes your engagement is a galactic farce. Screen. Lit up with the image of Commander Zarin broad-shouldered, holographically enhanced, and wearing a cape made of Chronal regrets. He scowled. You? You're the one who won her favor? You look like an undercooked nutrient loaf? Miles waved. Hi, technically I'm overcooked. Spent a year on a planet with 2 suns and no sunscreen. Zaran pointed dramatically. I challenge you to the right of disavowal. Trial by combat. Honor through annihilation. Miles turned to Saravai. This is still better than my last high school reunion. You do not have to accept, she said calmly. Zarin sneered.
Afraid?
Oh, deeply, Miles said. But I also just tripped over a sentient carpet and earned emotional praise, so I'm weirdly on a roll. He stepped forward. Okay, fine. What are the rules? Zarin's hologram grinned. No weapons. Only emotional projection and controlled. Telepathy. Perfect. I've been weaponizing my feelings since puberty. The arena was set. Floating discs surrounded by memory fields and honesty amplifiers. Zarin entered first, flanked by symphonic drones. Miles entered second, accompanied by Clarence, playing a playlist titled You Got This. Probably, the match began. Zarin fired the first projection. A heroic memory of saving an ambassador from a collapsing moon. It came with a smell of burnt ozone and dramatic music. Miles countered with a vision of him comforting a scared alien child during a station lockdown. He'd sung a lullaby, okay and full of wrong words, but it had worked. The audience murmured, Sir. Next move was a scene of Saravai, smiling at him during a battle-planning summit. Strong, noble, destined. Miles responded with a memory he hadn't even meant to choose. His pronunciation of quasar, just 2 people being unremarkable together. The amplifiers went silent. Then they glowed. Sira VA stood. That's enough. She walked 2 miles. I don't need trials or projections. I need someone who chooses me when things are ordinary. Zaran disappeared in a quiet poof of defeat and unresolved therapy. Miles looked at her. So, are we still doing this? Yes, she said. Because even through your confusion you see me. And you still want me? Every time. Even if I panic and quote space movies at emotionally inappropriate moments? That is part of the appeal, Clarence chimed in. Congratulations. Trial avoided. Suit sensors detect 80% rising affection, 15% confusion, 5% hunger. Miles smiled. Let's get married and get snacks. The ceremony began with a parade of sentient instruments, arguing over key signatures. The air shimmered with ozone and melodrama. Miles stood at the edge of the Grand Nexus Hall in his shimmering not-quite tuxedo, heart thumping like it was being attacked by a caffeinated squirrel. A procession of dignitaries floated past him on gravity cushions, each one giving him the same look, a cocktail of pity, curiosity, and is he really the one? Clarence pinged him privately. Your pulse is irregular. Should I deploy calming vapor or a holographic therapist that resembles your grandmother? Just let me panic in peace. Saravai entered to a wave of sound that wasn't music so much as structured awe. Her outfit moved like thought, elegant, strange, and quietly defiant of physics. Long ears were braided in patterns that told. A story in a Lari tradition, a story that began with duty and ended in choice. She stopped beside him. You're sweating. It's part of the earth-mating ritual. The wetter the forehead, the deeper the devotion. She smirked. Your species is incredibly committed to biological drama. Wait until you see our tax system. The Ilari. High Matriarch stepped forward with a ceremonial orb containing echoes of previous unions. It projected a hologram of her younger self getting married during a meteor storm. She blinked slowly. Are both parties still consenting? Saravai said. Miles paused, then looked at her. I think I've been consenting in increasingly elaborate ways since I said something stupid in a treaty chamber. Stupidity is how most important things begin, she replied. Then this is going to be legendary. The orb pulsed, field. A bonding light surrounded them. It asked no questions. It demanded no proof. It simply waited. Miles stepped forward. I didn't mean to fall into your life, but I did, and I kept falling. Past the weird traditions and the psychic vines and the talking furniture into something real. I don't know what kind of husband I'll be. I promise I'll never treat this like a joke again. Saravai nodded. And I accept you. Not because you are certain, but because you are not. Because you choose over and over, even when confused. That is more powerful than certainty. The bonding field sealed with a soft chime and an unexpected kazoo solo from Clarence. Applause followed, some clapping, some tentacle waving, some emotional pheromones released in complex bursts. Miles turned to Saravai. So, we're married. In like 23 systems, 24 after the paperwork clears, do I get a title? You do now. Can it be Captain Pizza? No. The reception featured a buffet of interplanetary delicacies, and one very enthusiastic. Fold Beast, who kept trying to give Miles spiritual advice about pasta. Saravai danced exactly once gracefully, possibly and, then pulled Miles into a waltz that involved awkward shuffling. Some mild toe injuries, and a surprising moment of weightlessness when the floor decided they were emotionally synchronized. The Ilari grandmother, who had up to that point only observed with regal silence, approached him at the cake-cutting ceremony. You, she said, poking him with a cane that glowed ominously, are nothing like what I expected. Thank you. Good. We've had enough perfection. Try not to implode. I'll do my best. She nodded once, as if sealing an ancient pact, then walked off humming what might have been a human sitcom theme. A few weeks later, they took their first unofficial vacation. No banners, no rituals, no space-folding bureaucrats. Just a small ship, 2 hammocks, and a planet with pink oceans that hummed at night. Miles sat on the deck, drinking something fizzy and possibly alive, and looked up at the stars. I used to think love was a thing that either happened or didn't, like lightning. Or allergies. Saravai lounged beside him, reading a holographic novel written entirely in scent. And now I think it's something you build, like IKEA furniture. Confusing instructions, missing pieces. But if you don't give up, you eventually get a slightly wobbly shelf that holds everything important. She closed her book and looked at him. And I am your shelf. You're the entire living room. She laughed. I'm still learning you. Same. They leaned against each other, quiet, surrounded by unfamiliar stars and the sound of a new kind of peace. No prophecies, no misunderstandings, no legal documents trying to burst into song. Just them, building something strange, something delicate, something unmistakably real.